Warning, this podcast may contain reference to abuse of a physical, verbal, or sexual nature. This podcast may also include opinions that people do not agree with. Thank you for listening. And once again, we're live.
Excellent.
So, hi, I'm Ray.
And I'm Ryan.
And this is Creativity, with just a couple of friends chatting about whatever we want to chat about during each episode. Problems, well, I don't think we've come up with any solutions, but attempted solutions.
Attempted solutions.
And I think we'll be kicking this episode off by mentioning the recent opening of lockdown and that. Both congratulations to the theatres and that.
I'm so glad they're back. That is amazing. Well done to everyone. First night. And again, break a leg to everyone. Theatres countrywide that have opened. Phantom of the Opera with Lucy St. James, the first woman of colour to play Christine. And with Wicked, with Book of Mormon, with The Mousetrap, they're all reopening. Absolutely. If you can get the chance, please go and support your local actors and your local theatres, because they have weathered many a storm this past year and a half, and they deserve a fantastic turnout. They really do.
And don't forget, though, as fantastic as the turnouts are, stay safe, wear your masks, but seriously, enjoy yourselves and that. Enjoy the creative industries are back.
Exactly.
So, as well, to do with opening up and, undoing lockdowns and that, I mean, Scotland, we still have some rules in place in that just to make sure we're safe, but England, all rules are out of the window.
Where to begin? Where to begin with this? You just know for a fact it's going to be a shit show.
I mean, well, wonderful. I say this with every drop of sarcasm capable in my monotone voice. Like that, just Boris Johnson after I can't remember his name, the new health secretary. Health secretary catches COVID, and Boris Johnson's like, remember to use your common sense. And he proceeds to go around to factories and amongst people and news reporters after being in contact with someone with COVID.
Exactly. It just feels...
lack of common sense.
Yeah, do you ever remember that comedy, the sitcom Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister?
Oh my god.
It feels like that, and I'm sat here just going like, no. And it also feels like this feels like a sketch out of Little Britain. Whereas Little Britain, and I say this with absolute incredulity, you compare the two, Little Britain, for everything is symbolised, for its malice and everything, it has more taste.
It really does. It's
and I'm sat there like, what?
It reminds me of when the whole Trump situation was going on across the water. It was the director of South Park came out and said, we are going to have to reel back on production. Not because we're, working too hard or whatever. It's because we can't come up with ideas because somehow reality's more stupid than satire.
Yeah, I was actually talking to someone about this because, what was it? Mr. Garrison, he runs for president. He becomes the Trump character. And then it was just like, it was totally impossible. It could not happen that someone so stupid, so anal and farcical could possibly be president, and yet 4 years of an anal, farcical, inept president. It was just like, I felt sorry, and I still feel sorry for all my American friends, because regardless of Joe Biden being in office, they're still feeling the ripples of the Trump administration. It is now very difficult to undo the damage of the Trump administration, because it literally means there is a very strong mistrust of any governing body, and I can completely understand why, because the mistrust is also being felt here because our leaders are showing themselves to be incredibly inept and incapable.
And a prime example of the way that, like you were saying, the Trump administration has kind of, it's broken a lot of faith for a lot of people in their government and whatnot. So the next government that comes in, a better government, it's going to have a lot harder time due to that. We have a prime example. I mean, don't get me wrong, unlike Biden, this guy's just as much of an asshole as our Prime Minister, Dominic Cummings, and his wonderful report coming out today.
Yes, the interview that airs on the 20th, because this will come out on Monday.
Week. Yeah,
this will be posted on Monday of next week. So tonight, on the 20th of July. Dominic Cummings is doing an interview about his experience as the chief advisor to Boris Johnson as who was Prime Minister, who still is Prime Minister.
What is the chief advisor's job even? Because I'd assume it would be to stop the Prime Minister doing stupid stuff.
It is meant
clearly he was not good at his job.
to be the Prime Minister's chief advisor, the cabinet is meant to go through the science and advise the Prime Minister on the best course of action, one that is both active, is not passive, but doesn't disrupt daily life. It's meant to be the best course of action in ways that people can still live a fundamental existence without as much suffering as there has been. And it appears that it didn't happen.
He was not good at his job.
He was not.
But
But this is also the same man, ladies and gentlemen, and others. That where to begin? After discovering that he had COVID, he proceeds to take his wife and children on a 200-plus mile journey up country to their country estate to self-isolate, stopping off at different points.
Tourism points, just want to point that out.
To refuel, and then proceeds during the recovery to test his eyes by driving to another tourist spot, because that seems the most sensible course, because obviously an optician
isn't as good at telling if your eyes work as a car crash.
No, just knock someone down, then you'll know.
Take the Prince Philip way. But I should not have said that as you were taking a drink of tea. I was genuinely looking at the mic like, oh no.
Oh no, that is the tea right there.
Yeah, but I appreciate that he's coming out and letting the cat out of the bag with everything, but at the same time, with the idiotic choices and things he's done, I'm looking at this as someone who's like, yay, finally someone's gonna rip the government a new a-hole. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm gonna have to take absolutely everything he says with give or take 6 grams of salt, because he also was one of those idiots. Like, he's sitting there going, he did this wrong, he did that wrong, and it's like, yeah, and you did too. You've broken my ability to believe any of the reports you come out with. And a lot of people are going to feel like that. A lot of the people that feel betrayed by what he did and, the fact he's bringing out this report they won't be looking at it with as much hope. But I was about to say Trump supporters, but I mean, he is pretty much budget Trump. The Johnson supporters it's a lot easier to just look at these reports and just go, oh no, it's someone that's just upset they got fired.
Well, that's the other interesting thing. The Johnson supporters, it was on Politics Live this morning, and they were all talking about, well, what about this WhatsApp message where Johnson has said that he didn't believe that the NHS was currently being overwhelmed, nor did they believe that they should kill the economy, quotes unquote, for the sake that it was only the over 80s, people above life expectancy, who were dying. Yeah. And I find that horrendous. And also, this is also the man with a death toll to the tune of 130,000 under his belt.
Also, this is the man that we have entrusted with our lives, with our country, with our negotiations with the rest of the world now that we've left Europe. I mean, it's like leaving a child to lead a, construction project at this point.
And that was the thing. It's another interesting thing because Cummings is actually the architect of Brexit. He's the architect of the Brexit negotiations and everything that went forward. And so this is a man who clearly, not just for his ineptitude as a government advisor during the coronavirus pandemic, he's also inept as an advisor to prime ministers during the time of our negotiations when Britain was dragging their feet about any form of deal with the European Union. So it feels like the man is vilified in almost every sense, in every quarter. A, for being a traitor in Johnson's Tory camp, and B, for the Remainers, for a man who essentially took Britain out of the EU against their will.
He's also, he's in every direction. He's ended up hopscotching his way into being a bad guy on everyone's radar because the Remainers hate him, the Leavers hate him for screwing up our deals, the Tories hate him for turning, not being with Johnson. The people against the Tories hate him because he's an idiot. He has hopscotched his way.
There is a laundry list
into every way that he can be an asshole, and I don't know what this report is meant to do. It might be what little shred of conscience he has, but honestly, I feel like it's no one's on my side. This might get me popular.
See, it feels that way because when he did what he did, and then he gave his quotes apology that wasn't really an apology at all. That was horrible. I know, it was painful to watch, and then he ends up being fired months afterwards.
Yeah.
And it just feels like, wait, what is going on? And then to find that the new advisor, who replaces Dominic Cummings, has tested positive for COVID-19, and Johnson refusing to isolate, but then he said he would isolate. So we've got a prime minister, we've got a government currently hopscotching, as you said, through all these different phases, all these different mindsets, just because.
Yeah.
It's the same way that when the autumn lockdown began, the schools were sent in for one day before we locked down again. And everyone sat there going like, what earth-shattering information did this man not have on Sunday that he suddenly had on Monday? And then on Tuesday we went back into the lockdown. It was just inept. And everything this government has done so far, granted they've thrown up the vaccine program, that is the only saving grace this government can be said to have, and that is probably what's going to win people over, is them just saying, oh, but we did the vaccines, we'll cover all the other things up, because this is essentially what our government does. They paper over the bad bits
with one good thing. Which isn't even a good thing. Not. Vaccines are outstanding. They're amazing. I'm chronic asthmatic. I get vaccines all the time. I even had the AstraZeneca vaccine, and being a chronic asthmatic, I've been on AstraZeneca meds my whole life, so I knew that I could trust it.
Yeah.
However, in a lot of ways, sitting there being like, oh, we vaccinated everyone, that makes us good people. No, a basic common sense or basic human rights, such as having a vaccine so you don't get killed, should not be a look at how altruistic I am. It's a look at how sensible you have been for the 3 milliseconds it took for you to just tick a box.
Mm-hmm. Because literally, this government has dragged its feet since the beginning. It didn't take it seriously beforehand. It mentioned the words herd immunity.
Oh, God.
Which is...
They don't even know how herd immunity works.
Exactly. Everyone has to have had it for herd immunity to work, and even if everyone has it, you will be talking with a much higher death toll than we already have. And even then, when people talk about herd immunity, in the greater outbreaks that have been in the last few hundred years, we've got smallpox, we've had cholera, we've had Spanish flu. Herd immunity was never once spoken.
Yeah, that was never. No one went in the Spanish flu and went, you know what we can do? Let us all just get everyone together, see who dies, and then, whoever lives. They didn't do that. They worked together, and yeah, I'm sure there were some countries or some places that had a bit of lag, that had a little bit of reluctance. But Britain went beyond the point of reluctance to sheer willful ignorance.
Well, see, the thing with Spanish flu is when people were told you need to stay away from each other, because they did do this because this is when Spanish flu was on the rise, they opened up again, and then there was a much greater death toll than before.
During the second wave.
Yeah, because Spanish flu killed about 3% of the world. It went global. And now it's one of those illnesses that we all get vaccinated for.
So that we don't have that problem. Which is why, listeners, I'm pretty sure that you have either been or will be getting vaccinated. But again, if there's anyone that, by some miracle, doesn't agree with our opinions or, absolutely hates our guts that has made it this far into the third episode even, Go get vaccinated. You have no excuse. It will not hurt you. All it will do is save lives.
But no, but then when not just the theatres opening yesterday, clubs also opened, and today they announced COVID passports.
Yeah.
Which feels in a lot of ways mind-boggling in the sense of so now we have to produce papers to prove our identity and our vaccination status.
I mean, I don't disagree with, proving that you're vaccinated and
No,
whatnot,
definitely.
But at the same time, I feel like it is a redundant request during, on Sunday night, hundreds of thousands of people were all cramped together in clubs without masks, counting down to when you're allowed to go into clubs and group together without masks. Like, if you have that kind of ridiculously redundant notion going on anyway of, hey, let's all group up and not social distance so we can celebrate the countdown to us not being allowed
not having
group
to
up.
social distance.
Yeah. And having at the point of having COVID vaccination passport, you've missed the mark by miles already. Why are you trying to turn the bullet around?
Well, what they're saying is it's meant to be an incentive to younger people to get their vaccinations, and this is meant to be imposed, I think, around about September.
We already know to get our vaccinations.
We do.
We are well ahead of it. The problem is, again, me and you were vulnerable, so we were higher on the list for vaccinations.
Well, see, I've only had my first vaccine. I may have asthma, but I was just in line like everyone else. I didn't have any...
I was one of the first to get it. But,
which is a good thing.
Yes. But it's insanity, the fact that, being this will encourage young people to be able to get a vaccine. And it's we would like our fucking vaccines. You, on the other hand, keep saying, young people don't need it. They're healthier. We need our vaccines. Don't encourage us to get something that doesn't exist. It's like going, hey, 25-year-olds, go out there and buy a house today. And it's I would love to, but my total savings come up to £25, and that's going out next week.
It's insane. And what they were talking about on Politics Live was the fact of these passports, they're under the threat of exclusion in certain things. So if you didn't have the vaccine, if you don't have those papers, you'd be excluded from certain things. You wouldn't be allowed into clubs, you wouldn't be allowed into theatres, you wouldn't be allowed to do any of that sort of thing. And it just feels that's not the way to get people to have their vaccines. No. You have to communicate with them, ask them, well, why don't you
want them, or how is it that you're not able to get it, and change it. Because again, with a lot of young people, it's not that we don't want the vaccine, it's that we can't book a week off to deal with, because again, I know it's safe, I've said it's safe and whatnot, but like any vaccine, it is a dead dose of the illness, and thusly your immune system reacts as if it's real.
You will have side effects.
Yeah, you will have, in my case, I was very dizzy and kind of ended up I couldn't look at my computer screen, and as a director and an editor, I need to be able to focus on the minutiae of computer screens. So imagine trying to work heavy machinery in that. But you can't book a week off. You can't, especially our generation, you can't afford a whole week off just because you want to protect the people around you. So why not give vaccine leave?
Exactly.
That would help young people. That would encourage people, is give them a week off to recover from the vaccine. And then I could see the amount of people getting them spiking.
Yeah, because a friend of mine who works in Primark, he had his first vaccine. He was fine. He got his second one. He was fine for the first day. Second day he went into work, he was violently sick. He was sent home. The side effects went everywhere. He was hearing things. He was talking to people that weren't there. He was just wait, what?
Welcome to the psychotic club.
Essentially, yeah. And so when you have side effects, it is literally the immune system fighting, because it's a new body. Something has been introduced into your system, and your immune system doesn't know what it is. So that's why you'll have the side effects. That's biological fact.
Yeah, that's keeping you safe, and that is good. So we do need that, but at the same time, we need almost protections in place to be allowed to have these vaccines and that. So I feel like rather than being like, let's exclude tons of people with pieces of paper that don't have pieces of paper, why not stop excluding people who quite physically can't afford to eat if they take this vaccine? Because again, that's the problem. It's nothing wrong with the vaccine. It's the system that it's designed on.
And it's also the 12-week gap that they imposed. It's now down to 8 weeks, but it was the 12-week gap, and there was nothing in the science that supported the claim that the vaccine would work with that 12-week gap. Even in that 8-week gap, what the scientists said was it is a period of 3 weeks that should be between first vaccine and the second. Whereas with the 12-week period, it was literally the government's way of getting mass first vaccinations done.
So they could pat themselves on the back.
So they could pat themselves on the back. Though, granted, first vaccinations, excellent. It's the road. It's the beginning. It's the building blocks of a road to the right place.
Then
but at the same time, it's a road that has so many unnecessary obstacles built in place as well.
And on top of that, it's very irritating that so many lockdowns are leaving in that when the infection rate is still so high, under the guise of 61% of the population has had their first vaccine. Great. 61% of the population are 40% safer from the vaccine, aka not even half as dangerous yet.
No.
And you're like, oh, it's not even half as dangerous. That's good, yes? No, that is bad. That if you cannot get it down to at least a quarter of how dangerous it is, you should not be opening shit up in that.
No.
And as much as, again, I would love for the creative arts to have certain amenities or rules put in that allow them, not like football, where you can have 60,000 people crammed together in a stadium giving each other COVID, but like allowing theaters and that to have been open with very strict safety precautions and that, especially because I'm no pandemic scientist, I'm no immunologist or anything. I'm just a dude that's had asthma all his life kind of thing. Goth and director, so I guess I've seen enough pandemic movies or that, see how this goes. But I get the feeling that either A, way more people are gonna die and we're gonna get more strains, or we're going into another lockdown by the end of the year. And if we're going into another lockdown, we need better rules in place rather than, oh, do what you want-ish. It's not really our problem. We're just going to clean our hands of all of it. It's a case of, no, if you are going to football, there is meant to be space. You will be wearing your masks, even if you are outdoors, like stadium kind of thing, because it's still close proximity. If you are going to the theater wearing masks, you are allowed to go to the theater would be nice.
That was the thing. From the start, clarity, or the lack thereof, was the biggest problem that we'd ever had. Because people were like, well, I actually don't know what they're saying because they were in no way clear.
Yeah.
But when it was the leaders of the devolved powers, when it was Ireland, it was Wales, it was Scotland, the clarity was there. They were very hard on. They didn't sugarcoat it, because this is the big problem, is the fact of the information that is being given to present advisors. It's being adulterated to please people. Whereas we don't have leaders who have the balls to state hard fact. They don't have the balls to state hard fact because they know for a fact if they state hard fact, they lose voters. This is
exactly.
And basically the vaccine program and this sort of ideology of they must be good because they got the vaccines up and running and everywhere else is just falling behind, whereas that's not the case at all, is the fact of come next election, this will get them voters. And people idolise it. Oh, it's like Boris did this, so you have to vote for him because he did this. He's such a great guy. And all I can see is the ineptitude and the failure, because right now I feel like with England opening up, even though Scotland still has like mandatory masks, you have to wear them and stuff like that, it just feels like 16 to 18 months have been wasted. And clapping for the NHS, though a great gesture, it's not enough.
Like last episode we were talking about gesture politics and that. Honestly, like Priti Patel, I'm pretty sure she was there clapping for the NHS.
She was.
So she can't argue with quote gesture
Yeah, so-
politics when it's like, let's not give nurses and doctors a raise to show how much we rely on them and how much they're respected. Let's just clap.
But then there was also the case of the nurses who were working on the front line
Yeah.
would not have a job the next week.
Yeah, and is that... Yeah, again, that is gesture politics. When you are the person who is able to change this and all you'd rather do is clap, that is gesture
That
politics.
is gesture politics. So it's basically...
At its worst.
Yeah, stop wasting time. Give them the money that they desperately need. Because we are meant to be the 6th largest economy in the world, and yet we still cannot fund our National Health Service properly. It has been dogged by 10 years of cuts and everything, and it just knows, like... nearly 11 years of austerity. What have they got to show for it? Where are the goods? Because even austerity that came in after World War II did not last this long. It only lasted 6 years.
And it lasted long enough for us to get back up on our feet. And then what did we do immediately once we got back up on our feet? The NHS was made.
Exactly.
Like, we pumped all that money from austerity into good things that helped us for 50 years on. And now we've been in 11 years of austerity. And you know what we get a reward for it as? More austerity!
It's like you pile on austerity and cuts and cuts and cuts, and yet you've got nothing good to show for it.
I feel another problem, though, is the word austerity itself is used, like when politicians are like, we'll fix the country using austerity.
But you can't fix a country with austerity. That is
Problem is, in a lot of ways, that, like, when I first heard that, I was like, oh, okay, that sounds like a great plan because it's an intelligent word. I did not know what the word austerity means. I did not know that austerity means taking money away from people, raising taxes, screwing over interest rates so that younger people or like other people in that cannot live just so that the rich people have money that then they can choose whether to or whether not to give it back to people. It's literally it's no different from, and you know, I not meaning to bash any form of religious ceremony in that here, but it's like the political equivalent of putting money in the basket in church. You don't know whether the church is going to give that back to the community or give that back to you or just going to hoard it to themselves. But then again, at least with a church, you kind of have the idea of at least they sort of have that God-fearing side of they will at least attempt to do something good with it. With these people up the top, they think they're gods.
And like, and that's the problem. That's the problem when you have a government that is essentially the disciples of Mammon, the god of greed. And when austerity began, it began in 2010, and this was a result of the 2008 financial crisis, which understandably, if austerity got us through, then it was needed because there was very little. It would have saved us because there was very little money going through. But Boris was part of the camp that bailed out the banks. No one in the banks got punished in any form.
Which they really should have had some form of punishment, which would have helped the people in a lot of ways.
They should have, but all they got were fines and a slap on the wrist. No one went to jail, and this was during the time of, and I remember it was the thriller novelist John le Carre, who had written a book about it. It was a book called Our Kind of Traitor, and it was talking about siphoning money. It was about money laundering, and banks have been and probably have always been guilty of laundering certain money. And the premise of the book is about whether where does black money come from, and this was about Russian oligarchs who had laundered money, black money, into the British system. It's like, when is it black money? When does it go grey? When does it go white? And le Carre had said, he went to a bank and he said, I asked 2 questions. And he said, and the questions were, my name is Mr. Orlov. I come from Moscow. And I have, say, $250 billion to deposit into a bank. How do I make? And I wish to make an account. How do I do this? And the bank managers would literally say, well, we're not detectives. So why don't you show us something like a passport or a driver's license and we'll see where we're going? Well, let's go for lunch. But whereas if someone like you or I were to walk in with that amount of money...
They'd be like, what the hell?
Exactly. They'd call the police, they'd ask for papers, they'd ask where you got the money.
Yeah, even winning the lottery, it's nearly impossible to actually legally put that money in a British bank account.
Exactly. And I know this because my uncle had won the lottery. He was a local who had won the lottery. He won, I think, £665,000. And
Well done
oh yeah, he was so lucky, the bastard. But no, and he enjoyed a lot of things. He went to New York, he went to Florida, he got a new house, he got cars and stuff like that, and it's great. And he's literally, and they've, in December, their granddaughter came along, which is amazing. And it just feels that the moment anyone comes into contact with that sort of money, everything goes wrong. And laundering has happened, and like the Royal Bank was accused of it and they were found guilty. Numerous banks in Britain have been found guilty of doing it, but they were all slapped with a fine and no one went to jail. It was the same thing with the financial crisis. Where everyone got a slap on the wrist, they got a bit of a fine, but no one went to jail. They were essentially protected so they wouldn't collapse. And we all know what happens when a bank collapses because we've seen it in the market crash of 1929.
Yeah, we know how horrible it goes. So we
Exactly.
can understand trying to protect the system, but there's a difference between protecting the system and keeping your buddies safe.
I know, but there was also a case of, well, where does all that money go? Because
where did the fines go? Because, again, it was our taxes that were used to bail out the banks.
It was.
Where is our reimbursement? I mean, it wasn't our taxes because we were children
But
at the time.
it was our family's taxes.
Yeah.
It was the taxes of our parents. Like, where did that money go? Where did the fines incurred by our taxes actually go? And when we hit 11 years of austerity with absolutely nothing to show for it, you've got to immediately think, this is not working. Why is this still in place?
Yeah.
And if we're meant to be the 6th largest economy in the world, we are bound to have enough money to sort certain things out.
Yeah. An insane thing that I had was, or that I saw recently actually, was the leader of Labour, Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer.
That's it. I mean, I have my reservations about him as a person. To do with the whole BBC scandal and that back after Savile's death and whatnot. So I've got my reservations about him. But at the same time, he was going around and attempting to, find a way of, like, what would it take for ex-Labour voters to vote Labour again? And there were two common things that kept coming up that I don't understand and I don't agree with. One of which, where a lot of them was like, oh, well, Corbyn was a bad leader. It's like, Corbyn was an idealist to probably not a great extreme, but at least he wanted good in a way. He just didn't know how to realistically get it. Good points, bad points with that. But another thing that they said was, don't bother helping 25-year-olds and younger. I will vote Labour if you stop helping people that refuse to get jobs and pay taxes. Now, me and you are very lucky in a way because we're part of the creative industries and that we've got the ability to work for ourselves to an extent. But a lot of people that I know don't have that. And they're saying that it's, they are too lazy to go and buy their own house. They'd rather rent. I know a man that's working in McDonald's as a manager, working 60-hour weeks some weeks, and he still barely has enough to pay rent. Not because he's going out getting wasted or wasting all his money on everything. It's all going on his taxes, his bills, his rent. So he can't save for a house. He started saving, and we counted it up. It would take him 30 years to buy a one-bedroom house.
See, and this is another problem, and it's a problem of the boomer generation. That they sort of project onto us. It's like things are not the same as way back when. They never will be. They will never be the same because I would kill to have a house that I can pay for. A really nice house with a garden that I can maintain.
I would love...
And I would love a place space. To set roots. I know, I would love space. And it's a place of, I can be a good host. We can have dinner parties, have tea and scandal and stuff like that. These are the things I dream of. Because I don't dream as a writer. I don't dream of like fame and fortune. I dream of just being able to live comfortably through work I know I can do and work I know is good.
And same with me as a director. I'm not being a director because I want to go out there and be like, I mean, I really hope that no one wants to be the next Joss Whedon considering everything. But, I like going out there and being the next Rousseau brothers and that. I don't dream of that. I dream of having enough money to set down some roots, set up a proper home studio on that, and just spend the rest of my life just making stuff so that I can just keep making more stuff. That's what I want. Like, everyone's sitting there like, oh, you guys care about this, your avocado toast. It's like, I don't like avocados.
And it's like they say we care about our avocado toast, and I'm sat there going like, we can't afford avocado toast. Why would we care about avocado toast if we can't fucking afford it?
I haven't tasted guacamole in years.
Oh, you see, as much as I love guacamole, I am one of those people. I think it was Oscar Wilde that said, if you're not living outside your means, are you even living? That paraphrased. But it's also a case of, no, I wish to be able to earn enough money through my work and through working, because I am not shy of working. I've worked in many jobs. I worked in Toys R Us. I worked as a community companion. I worked in a Premier Inn.
Yeah, I've worked
cleaning up people's vomit from beds.
I've worked in McDonald's. Like, everyone's there.
We are not, like, our generation, we are not allergic to work. What we are allergic to, and what we don't view as right, is the fact of, in order to live, we have to work. Because when we live, we are meant to live. We're not meant to slave our lives away for so little. And just be like, oh, just this little treat here. We shouldn't be working twice as hard to please someone up the stairs. We shouldn't be working to please anyone. We should be working because we enjoy the work.
Yeah.
And when you put people in jobs that they actually enjoy, you will find out that their productivity, as well as their serotonin, it goes right up. Their endorphins go skyrocketing through the roof. And because they enjoy what they do. But when you've got people slaving away, like your friend, working in a McDonald's, trying to save up for a house that'll spend him 30 years to earn for. And here's another thing.
And he's already in his 30s.
Exactly.
Nearly.
The price of housing has gone way up with inflation. So a house that was worth something way back when in the 80s...
Like, it would have been worth, like, maybe 5 years saving to be able to put a deposit down.
Essentially.
Now we're going to have to... Yeah, now it costs 30 years worth of saving. Not to buy the whole house, to put a deposit.
To put a deposit on it. And I know for a fact, if I don't make it as a writer, I will never own a property as much as I want to. I would spend the rest of my life renting.
Same as me as a director, yeah.
And I find that grossly unfair, because it's also a case of money has sort of lost its value.
Yeah.
Because £8.20, say in the 60s and the 70s, £8.20, quite expensive. And it was worth, that's a lot of money. So bread would have been about 2 shillings or something like that. Whereas today...
Shillings don't even exist.
Shillings don't exist. But the spending power of a 1960s 8 quid with today's 8 quid is nothing.
At least rent kind of thing.
Yeah,
Like, it would have been...
You can't even buy sanitary products.
Yeah, you can.
On 8 quid. Whereas back then, when we had the imperial system of money with shillings, halfpennies, crowns, and stuff like that, it did actually work.
But that was even pre-inflation, and that was
pre-inflation. And when we went to the decimal system, and the pound just dropped in its value because look at the Freddos, their prices inflated. You could get them for a 5p, and now they're something like 50 to 75p.
£1.20.
Are they one? No.
For the last time I saw a caramel Freddo, now they're my favorite Freddos.
No.
I used to have them all the time on my way to primary school. I'd have a caramel Freddo. My uncle would like get them in packs and that, because he used to be able to get a pack of them for like 2 quid or something like that for caramels. And so I'd go to school every day. And I ended up seeing a caramel Freddo, limited edition these days, for £1.20.
Oh no!
Which I think is a rip-off in itself.
And the Freddo, it's not even the size of
the palm of my hand. Yeah, it's tiny.
It's tiny, and for it to be that expensive, it's unreal. But no, it's just everything. Every price has been inflated. Like this copy of Les Miserables here.
Speak of, we have one on our desk while we're recording the podcast because it's totally our anthem book at this point.
So this costs in Britain $12.99. Whereas if you went back to the 90s, a classic novel like this would have cost you about $2.99.
Yeah, I remember that from I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh, the card game, a lot, and booster packs for 9 cards used to be 75 pence. Now they're a $5.
Exactly. So prices inflate, and what the elder generations don't seem to grasp is the fact of no matter how hard our generation worked, no matter how hard we slave away, no matter how much we save, we will still never be able to properly own a house.
Because it's not possible. There quite physically aren't enough hours in the week at this point.
Absolutely
because everyone's like, oh, if you work overtime, if you work harder. I worked overtime when I used to be one of I've had several jobs in that, and I've worked overtime a lot. And you know what? Companies don't pay overtime.
They don't.
Like, you get all these ones, like, that's what, if you ever see on a job application, are you flexible? That quite literally means, are you willing to work overtime for free? And if you don't say, yes, I'm willing to work overtime for free,
you won't get the job.
You don't get the job. And a lot of people don't see that. And again, like I said, we're very lucky as a writer and a director because we kind of get to pick our own hours. But at the same time, there's a massive issue, and I do keep saying the fact that, I'm white, straight, cis, I have a lot of benefits in that. And at the same time, though, I am disabled. Like, I've got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so my joints dislocate. I mean, a lot of people in that, it's considered incredibly bad at the point where your joints start dislocating 4 times a month. Because I used to be an avid martial artist, fight choreographer, free runner. I used to jump off buildings and everything. I wanted to be a stuntman like my grandfather for a while. Now, my joints can dislocate up to 2 to 3 times a day, depending on them, especially my knee and my hip. So I can't physically go out there and do jobs that are considered the kinds of jobs that men can do. Like, I can't do labor jobs. I can't become a police officer. No. I can't even comfortably, like, I'm an animator and a director, and I have to sit in my chair for like 8 hours a day kind of thing. I can't comfortably do that because my wrist goes. And it's... The older generation forget that, yeah, you used to work yourselves to the bone and be satisfied. We work ourselves to the bone for something that some of us can't physically even do.
And it's not even
and it's
that.
For nothing.
And it's not even that. It's also the structure of the work system as it is. Because this work
Very
system,
broken.
it doesn't even work properly because the work system hasn't changed with time. The work system was always meant to be the man went to work, the woman stayed at home, cooked.
And don't get me wrong, it's good that women are, encouraged to get out there and work.
Exactly.
And it's
Absolutely. It's fantastic.
However,
but that's the thing. The system didn't change because it's now when you rent, you are now you're doing groceries, you're keeping the flat, you're keeping your house clean, you're keeping everything up to date, you're on your taxes, you're on your electric, you're on your gas, you are working. There are not enough hours in the day because the system itself does not work for such the system doesn't work for such people anymore because it is obscenely outdated because
it's based off of this.
It's based off of this old. It's based off of this idea of the man is the breadwinner. The woman will stay at home. She'll cook. She'll clean. She keeps the fort manned essentially until the man comes home. And that was the thing. It was always meant to be. You could survive off of that. You could live off of that quite easily.
One person working that many hours.
Yeah, but now you can't do that anymore.
So both of you have to work. And I can hear the comments already about the fact of, but we can't afford to have one person at home kind of thing. And that's the problem.
That's the problem.
It's outstanding that women are encouraged to get into the workplace. I honestly feel like a lot of workplaces need to do more to make women more inviting in a way.
Oh, definitely.
For women in that, especially, again, I know that, like, getting into directing in that for women, even since, like, Jodie Foster's time, like, even now, it's becoming more common to see female directors out there and black directors, and it's amazing, but I feel like we need to, again, open the doors a little bit more in that case. And again, same in any workplace. But the problem is that it shouldn't have to be a case of both. I mean, we say the man and the woman, but the man and the man, the woman and the woman, the they and
like
them.
cohabiting.
Yeah. both of them shouldn't have to work 16 hours a day.
No.
And then come home and pass out and have their house a total wreck. So they probably have to pay for a maid, which means they'd have to work more.
And you know what, even worse, God forbid that they have children, because you won't be seeing your kids. You won't have any quality time with them. And also because Britain itself actually, and America doesn't offer maternity leave whatsoever. Whereas places like Canada and Italy, they offer you 57 weeks of maternity leave. Paid maternity leave.
My father would have killed for that because I never grew up with my father in that, but I'm very close friends with him, sort of thing. You know, it's still father-son. But he's been looking after my recently, she's now 2 little sister. And when she was born, he would have killed for the chance to spend more time with her because he is not only an an auxiliary nurse in a hospital, he's also a mental health nurse. So he has 0 time off. He is working night shifts, day shifts, in straight on and off.
Her.
Yeah, the very little time that he gets to see her, he cherishes every single second. And I feel like, you should always cherish every moment you get with your kids.
Exactly.
I can't stand parents that, just kind of brush their kids off as, it wasn't my choice. And it's like, well, they kind of was.
Well, see, that was that was the thing, actually. When I was working in Toys R Us, our then manager, who had a wee boy, and she was just there at work, and it's just like...
It's not fair that you don't get time to spend with your kids.
I know, it's also okay. Well, then again, being at work was her choice. Even on her off days, she was in work.
That is sad.
And it's a case of, well, when I look at it, it's just like, how are your kids going to respond to that? Are they going to be like, oh, it's okay, I knew that? Or are they going to think, why weren't you there?
Yeah, why was work more important than me? Why was... It's a question that, again, I come from a broken home, and it's a question that I could easily ask certain people. I would never ask my father that because he makes it known every single time he sees me that he regrets every second he never spent with me.
And it's also a sad
my other
thing.
parent, I could easily sit there and go, why was your 14th boyfriend more important than your kid? And I hate the idea of being a kid being able to ask that.
Yeah, and it's also a case of it's also really sad of having to be in a societal situation where those questions need be asked.
Yeah.
And also, following on from the topic of work, it's also the idea of how the arts aren't real work. Now,
we talked about the I say Fatima in quotations because the woman in the picture wasn't even called Fatima.
Nope.
They named her that because she was a woman of color. So they went, let's pick a woman of color name, which I think is immensely racist from the get-go.
Because when that posted out, apparently it was done some years ago, but then it crept up when they said that people should retrain.
But creative people shouldn't have to retrain.
They shouldn't, because their work is viable and their work is necessary. Because I'm sorry, but I would not have lasted under this lockdown if I didn't have music, if I didn't have the books that are on my shelves. And it's the fact of...
With me, it was games and movies.
Exactly. People slave themselves away. We slave ourselves away for our art. And it's only the fact of it's not real work until you are successful.
Which is... not correct, because
it's not correct at all. And I sat there just going like, really?
Yeah.
And I actually got into a full-blown argument with someone who said, oh, it's not real work. They're not slaving over something. They
yes,
shouldn't.
They are.
They're slaving over their craft. Just because they're not slaving on a building site or in front of a computer.
Yeah. Just because we're
doing
not
graphs and accounting doesn't mean that their work is less viable.
Just because we don't have a quote. Well, we do have quotas to hit. Even if we work for ourselves, we set ourselves targets. Yeah, but we're not going to someone going, please, sir, may my nose become more brown.
No, it's literally it's unreal, because I've always treated my writing as work. Yeah. I have a schedule, even though I write later in the day because I function more at night
later in the
than
day.
I do.
I'm the same with my work and that, unless I'm filming because I have to stick to a daytime or nighttime schedule for filming.
I'm always like, if I stick to a daytime schedule, which I sometimes do, but I'm more of a night owl than I am, I will write until I have accrued a certain amount of words. I always have a goal, and that goal is usually between 3,000 and 4,500 words. So that's essentially up to half to a complete chapter.
Yeah.
And I work until then, and sometimes I don't hit that goal, sometimes I do. If I hit 4,500 words, that's me on a roll, that's me on a good day.
Yeah.
If I finish a chapter, that's me on a good day. But if I finish that chapter that I've already been halfway through, I will start the next one.
Yeah.
And it's a case of, because I'm not successful, though I've already had a book published, it was a collection of short stories, and it's out there.
Which was amazing.
Thank you. It doesn't mean that I'm not working. I'm actually doing something that requires a lot of skill. It requires a lot of concentration, and it requires a lot of dedication, just like any other job. It's just the fact of you're not seeing the returns from it immediately, and you're not seeing that check at the end of every month, because writing and directing, the arts are very precarious. They're very precarious jobs, but people risk it all for those jobs because they love what they do. And I love what I do. Like, I would happily spend the next 7 years penning the next Les Miserables for fantasy, and like chasing like the Booker Prize and stuff like that. And that is an aim of mine. I'm trying to get a fantasy to win the Booker Prize and stick it up and like just like stick 2 fingers up to the establishment. I'd love to do that.
Make you a deal. If you win the Booker Prize with a fantasy, I call being the director to turn it into a movie.
I would,
or a TV series, because your writing would be very
I would kill to have you direct one of my any one of my books. I really would. But no, it's a case of people don't view the arts as real work, and it's just appalling, because when I see someone say they don't support the arts, when they say it's not real work, and yet I sit there.
It's like, you're listening to music, aren't you?
You're listening to music. You're reading that book, aren't you?
You're looking at this Facebook page, which was all graphically designed by a creative.
Yeah. And it's like, well, no, they are viable
You're
jobs.
using your phone, which all of the motions and swipes, you're using your computer, which the mouse, all done by animators, programmers, creatives.
Yeah.
The world runs on so much creativity that you don't really... Like, you could be a builder and sit there and go, well, creative arts aren't a real job. Really? Then you don't have a job, because you need an architect to design what you do, which is a creative job, to create a logistic job.
I know, and you also need like a designer for the inside of homes and stuff like that. Yeah, I can't remember what they're called.
Interior designer,
That's the one. Thank you. I completely blanked on that one. But no, you need interior.
It's really simple, isn't it?
Yeah, it really. But this is me. Anything simple, it's like way over the top of my head.
Same,
I know, blank. But no, it's like you need interior design, you need architecture, you need people who know color schemes, you need creative. The creative industry brings out all these things, and yet it is still not considered a viable job. If you're not a builder, if you're not a dentist, if you're not a doctor, if you're not any of these things, if you're not like a CEO or an accountant or anything like that, you're not viable. And it's just shit. Exactly. And I'm like, no.
I feel like in Britain, that is such a... Especially in Scotland, to have that kind of a view of creativity isn't a job is honestly, like, you get so many people in Scotland that are like, oh, I can't even do I'm Scottish and I can't do a Scottish accent without it being like racist Scottish. But it's that moment where they sit there, like, the really bad, like Mike Myers kind of Scottish.
It's like big
fat bastard
going like, oh,
yeah.
Like, the creative industry's no a fucking job. It's just this, it's just that, it's pansy work. And I'm just sat there going like, oh my
Any of that,
God.
To be there and to be Scottish and say that is to renounce your own country. Because Scotland especially, like Britain in general, but Scotland especially, has been a country that thrives off of. Even if you're sitting there as a Scottish person going, the Jacobite War, that was done on creative strategy. Yes, we lost it, but we were still cool. Killiecrankie still happened.
All about imagination.
Alan Turing, a creative person. Yeah, he created a computer, but he did it inventively, which is creative.
And he broke the Enigma code, and that takes imagination.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. And it's that we think effectively, we think like computers. We try to think logically, but the world needs the illogical side of things. It needs fantasy. Like Terry Pratchett said it best. Human beings need fantasy to be human, to be the place where the falling star meets the rising ape. Mm-hmm. And essentially, you need fantasy and fairy tales like The Little Lies. You need the Little Lies as practice in order to believe the bigger ones like Justice, Mercy, and all that sort of stuff. And that's what he said. And I completely believe that. And
it's reached a point now where humans need fantasy so much that scientists have turned around and said, right, we need to keep people away from chemical waste plants and like old places where we buried stuff when we weren't thinking. Well, and they've said, I want you to come up with fairy tales and urban legends.
Well, see, that was the thing.
I love that.
Well, see, that was the thing. Einstein, the greatest thinker that we've ever had in the 20th century, he said it best. If you want your children to be smart, read them fairy tales.
Because it makes them think outside the box.
It does. Abstract thinking is fantastic. And there is a story, actually. It was by Jorge Luis Borges, who was an Argentinian writer. Fantastic. I think you'd love him. He was the father of magical realism, which was then taken up by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who then penned 100 Years of Solitude. And the story, Funes the Memorias, or Funes his memory, depending on what translation you read, it's about a man who hits his head in a horse riding accident, and he remembers everything he has ever seen in great detail. So if he looks at a glass of wine, he sees the grapes and the vines upon which those grapes were grown, and the vineyard that it came from, and its point in history, the place, its locality, and everything. But whereas in order to sleep, he has to imagine a place of town that he's never been to. And he can't be said to think properly, because to actually think is to abstract, to realise a difference. And therefore it is not memory, therefore it doesn't work. And essentially he goes mad. But whereas we've been taught to think all of that. We've been taught to think like Funes. We're taught facts and memory and stuff like that. But whereas we're taught the abstract thought is not a good thing, because fantasy essentially in our teaching and in every other form of industry, abstraction and fantasy and imagination, they are dirty words. They've been considered very dirty, especially in our own in the literary world, especially because fantasy has been thought of as a dirty word because it's a genre. And I have to say of this, literary fiction, realist fiction, which I have nothing against, I will point this out.
It's just not as enticing sometimes.
It's not even that. It's more the fact of literary fiction, realism, it doesn't tackle the big issues that have been going on. Like, the big issues I've seen have been tackled by children's stories, by fantasy, by science fiction. They're asking the bigger questions. Like, genre has been taking on these questions. Like, the big example I can think of most recently, and I love this show and I love the books, is His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. That book asks some very fundamental questions about existence and about growing up. And it's about, like, it's also like with Harry Potter, it's children fighting in an adult's war.
Fantasy gives a space where we can ask questions that we're too scared to ask in reality.
Exactly.
And again, it's like you said, imagination's become such a dirty word in that. It's like when you're younger, and I mean, I even experienced this recently with my recent therapist that I recently ended up not going to them anymore after it was do you enjoy fantasy? Do you enjoy Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy books? You know, are you a storyteller? And it's like, well, yeah, I'm a director.
I'm all of these things.
And it was, okay, then I want you to understand that means that generally means that you're a prolific liar. And it's like, what? Where is this connection? And it comes down to if you are willing to immerse yourself in a world that isn't this brick and mortar. An interesting word I picked up recently was modernity. if you don't live in that, you are a liar. You are a failure and you are broken. Now, as someone who, has, neurological psychosis, so I can't live in normal reality if I wanted to. That's a really unfair thing to push on anybody. The idea that if you do not live in a world that is grey, where your politicians can lie as much as they like and you just have to take their word for it because that's how it is, to be considered wrong for wanting to live in a world where Gandalf the Grey teaches a young hobbit or lets a young hobbit take the most dangerous thing in creation across the continent. Like, if you can't escape into that world or the worlds of, like, Final Fantasy and Dungeons & Dragons or Terry Pratchett, if you're told that escaping there is wrong, then in all honesty, I say be wrong, because we need that.
I'd much rather be wrong than be a fool.
Exactly.
But no, actually, I believe I posted this, and we talked about it quite recently. It was about a creative writing professor who sneered a student for reading Terry Pratchett, and it was just like, well, it's not very highbrow. And it's like, well, it doesn't need to be, because it is still worthy of literature with a capital L, because there's not one human issue that Terry Pratchett did not touch upon.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be highbrow to be effective. I mean, no offense here. So in animation, and no offense to the creator of South Park, in animation, South Park is considered the equivalent of the worst sin, because it's considered by all the hoity-toity ones very lowbrow, very punches below the belt. And it's like, well, yeah, it's a satire. That's its job, is to punch below the belt. And I get it tackles issues that honestly you'd never see tackled in EastEnders.
No, definitely not. But
Terry Pratchett tackles those, and even like, I mean, her, again, her name is a bit of a sin at this point, but J.K. Rowling.
Well, the love it or hate her, J.K. Rowling inspired an entire generation to read.
She did.
Through that magical world that everyone loves.
Yep, and I will not deny this, like, again, she may not be a great person, but she caused a great effect.
She did. Like, she inspired, through the lens of fantasy, something. She taught children, essentially, how I look at it, it's Harry Potter is a letter saying, be better than we are.
Yeah.
And I take that lesson from it, and
taking that nice Tony Stark quote right there, just, I want to be like you, I want you to be better.
Definitely. And it's also things like, well, look at the Lord of the Rings. Everyone thinks that is just, it's very it's highbrow for its genre, like this kind of writing with an italics in this and underline.
Yeah,
like
but
it's a very sneering word. It was like this kind of material. But when you look at it, Lord of the Rings, it resurrects something that a lot of critics actually didn't like. It resurrected something the critics thought was dead, and people gobbled it up and they loved it.
Yeah.
But it's also, when you look deeper into the Lord of the Rings, it's a beautiful story of love, of friendship, and of loving the values of the world and fighting to the death to protect them. And it's also it's a stand. It's not just this.
Even the smallest creature's gonna have the biggest change.
Well, that's the thing, exactly. And it's about these 4 hobbits that have essentially, they've lived very closeted, very sheltered lives in the Shire, and they've found themselves pitted against the most impossible odds. They find themselves in a world that is far too big for them, in events that are far too big for them. And I noticed this whenever I watched The Hobbit, actually. It was the end of the second film, The Desolation of Smaug, where Smaug has come out of the molten lake of gold, and he's screaming, "Revenge! I will show you revenge!" And you just notice it's the look on Bilbo's face as he's going by. He's terrified. Yeah. He's absolutely terrified.
Amazing acting.
It's amazing acting. He's horrified, but then he realizes, in the sense of, he's with a company of people who have come through hellfire and high water, very literally.
Yeah.
To find that, like, the world, it's essentially, it's much, much darker than anyone, and even he anticipated it, because he's lived such a sheltered life. And this adventure, marvelous adventure though it may be, it's probably one of the darkest parts of his life that he's ever seen, because we're dealing with a dragon that comes from the first age of Middle Earth that has also witnessed dark deeds done under the guise of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord. And then it comes with Frodo, Sam, Merry and Pippin. They find themselves caught up in a war that is far too big for them. Like, the first moment they see the Black Riders.
Yeah.
And it's this moment of
dread.
It's dread, and it's just like, these things are following us, and then the closer we get to Mordor, the grander things get, and the smaller they feel.
Yeah.
And it's like they're caught up in the great deeds of the world, and they're so small and they feel so insignificant, but at the same time they change the world.
It teaches a story that in a lot of ways a lot of kids need, like whether it's too highbrow or too fantastical, it teaches kids a story of, even without second breakfast you can change the world,
basically. And they do. But it's like P.D. James, she was a very famed crime novelist, the writer of the Dalgleish series, and she also penned a sci-fi novel called The Children of Men,
I know
which
that
then
one.
became the film. And she said, well, if we were ever stranded in a foreign country, in a hotel, and the next flight wasn't until the next day, and there were two books on the bedside table. One is the winner of a prestigious prize, and the other one's an Agatha Christie. I know which one I would reach out for. And I know for a fact which one I would reach out for, because genre tackles so many things, and genre is not a dirty word. It should be fun. Like some of the
imagination is also not a dirty word.
Some of the greatest novels ever written have been genre fiction.
Yeah.
Like Les Miserables here. It's a historical novel.
But it's a fiction.
It's fiction, but it's a historical novel. It's fiction, and look at Mary Renault, who wrote the Alexander trilogy, Fire from Heaven, The Persian Boy, and Funeral Games.
I could even pull down my Dorian Gray book.
Exactly. All genre should never be considered a dirty word. Though people say, "Oh, it's so much different now," it really isn't, because literary elitism is still very much alive and well,
Exactly.
and it does exist. Like in Britain. The book I'm working on right now, it's a gothic horror fantasy. I've got more chance of that being published in hardcover in America than I've got over here, because
of literary elitism.
Because it wouldn't be considered the next J.K. Rowling, it wouldn't be considered the next Dan Brown.
Yeah.
But whereas I've got more chance in America, because America's more open to this kind of acceptance and of this sort of literature.
Even without the, like, it may still exist, the elitism, but nonetheless, and I feel like this will be a good closing note, since we've gone over by nearly 10 minutes again. Sorry, it's still around an hour. But I feel like as much as the elitism still exists, whether it's in creative and whether it's, non-creative politicians putting us down in that, or whether you're just someone working in a menial job and you want to be able to get a house and that and whatnot, it's a case of anything, again, like, changing the world while being a hobbit, or, a painting that can keep you alive forever. Those, although they're fantasy, they give the idea that there's something inside us that could continue and can keep us going, even through COVID, austerity, any of it. Fantasy can keep us going. And I feel like a good closing note is the fact of don't write off fantasy, and in my opinion, embrace it. And be comfortable telling stories. Like, whether there's someone else's stories and you've heard it or read it, like, don't plagiarize. But tell stories, make up worlds, and just enjoy the fantastic, no matter what age you are.
Yeah, stories will do a lot more for you than a textbook ever will. You may become a nuclear physician, you may become a great marine biologist, you may be the greatest whatever. But at the same time, telling a story, reading a story will enrich your life. Stories always have. Like, I would love to see the things you come up with in the future. I'm very excited to see what you come up with in the future, because I know you to be a very skilled storyteller.
And vice versa with you. I look forward to reading more of your books.
Thank you.
Because again, your short stories were outstanding, and I look forward to reading all your new stuff coming out.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, I can't wait to get the last few touches on my next production and
Excellent.
Send it to you.
Thank you.
But yes, nonetheless, so yeah, on that closing note of don't be afraid to be imaginative. I look forward to tonight's thing with Dominic Cummings, although I'll be taking it with salt.
Oh yeah.
And
saltier than the Dead Sea, I would
oh
argue.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, we shall again. We'll be back next week as always.
As always, thank you so much for listening in, wherever you are, whoever you are, and please do keep safe. Please do wear your mask. Please do think of others. Show empathy. And if you can, please go to the theatres and give them such a fantastic welcome as they deserve, because they have gone through so much and come out all the better and the stronger. Please do give them a complete round of applause, because they deserve that welcome back.
That they do. But yes, nonetheless, we shall see all you guys next week. Or
Thank you.
You'll hear us next week
You
anyway.
will absolutely hear us next week. Take care, everyone.